cuentan con todos los servicios que usted...
To go out on stage, not have...
Dear Terrence, I love you much. You've been nothing but open-hearted and emotionally available and supportive and nurturing and consummately there for me. I kept drawing you in and pushing you away. I remember how beautiful it was to fall asleep on your couch and cry in front of you for the first time. You were the best platform from which to jump beyond myself. What was wrong with me?
Say hello to my little friend! Okay, you want to play rough? Okay. Go! Okay, you like that? Huh? You want more?
The last sequence of Scarface is one of my favorites in all of film. There was a short period of my life when I seriously considered pursuing a career in the criminal arts. Sometimes I regret not following this ambition. I think I would have been a good criminal, though if I had, there is no doubt I would be dead today. But more on that later. When I first saw Al Pacino pick up his gun and go out in a blaze of glory in a bloodbath at the tender age of 20, it somehow spoke to some inner being which makes up the family of personas that define my character. At 20, I couldn't explain it, though. Today, I'm coming into possession of a very faint glimmer of what I believe to be self-awareness. And like a child discovering the surreal properties of a slinky on a set of stairs, I've embarked on a most unhealthy and self-indulgent investigation into what it is to be a man in the last year of the 20th century. Now, before you anxiously eject this tape from your machine, let me assure you this is a mere subtext of what you're about to see. Overtly, this video is to let everyone know that I'm still alive and gainfully employed in Tucson, Arizona. Also, I'm hoping to elicit some creative responses. And finally, I'm hoping to entertain. I mean, goddamn, that's all I've ever really wanted to do for as long as I can remember. All I've ever wanted to do is entertain people. I entertain with this. It's a Panasonic digital video camera. It has a color monitor, a black and white viewfinder, an audio receiver that gets sound from 2 wireless microphones, a hardwired boom microphone, a light, a lens, a battery, and a place to put a tape. It all sits on a tripod. That's it, real simple. On Flag Day last year, I went to the Elks Lodge. The Elks in general are a patriotic lot, and they take the various patriotic holidays very seriously. I respect this and try to do them justice when I walk into their place to do a story on them. On this day, I had a gal who'd been a prisoner of war during World War II. She was going to give a speech. I got there early so I could get her alone for an interview. Once I got it all set up, we started talking. I asked her to tell a story that would illustrate the importance of the flag to her. She told me how in early 1942 she'd watched as they dropped the flag over Manila in the Philippines, declaring Manila an open city, sparing it from bombing or artillery bombardment. She told me how she was one of the last to leave the hospital in the city as the Japanese were entering the suburbs. She talked of getting on a boat at dusk and heading out into Subic Bay, hiding behind hulls of sunken ships to avoid being spotted by the Japanese. She talked of the mad dash at dawn southward along the Bataan Peninsula, and finally to the island of Corregidor. She told me of the pride and security she felt at seeing the flag still flying here on this island. I was mesmerized. I glanced up at my camera to make sure everything was okay, only to discover that the tape was not rolling. It's at moments like these that I realize what a miracle it is that I've survived to the ripe old age of 34. I live in a shopping mall. No kidding. On my street there are 10 bars, 8 restaurants, 5 coffee houses, 4 hair salons, 4 used clothing stores, a gay disco, and a gay bookstore. Actually, it's a lesbian bookstore, to be specific. It's a very violent street. You just can't have all that alcohol flowing without some jerk resorting to angry violence once in a while. At this place, across the street from where I live, every Tuesday they have this thing called penny pitchers. $5 a door gets you in, and they sell you these mini pint-sized pitchers of domestic beer for a penny. Around 11 at night, the shouting starts. This experience taught me something about myself. I hate mean drunks. But what are you gonna do? Kick their ass? Yeah, right. So I preach. I'm in the media, after all.
Nothing but love.
We're trying to build a world where we can live without fear.
People forgot to love each other, forgot to touch, forgot to say hi, forgot to say I love you.
This is just really comfortable for me to do during the summer to get away from society.
And I'm David, this is my son Conrad. We traveled from Vermont. We're here to see all our friends and family. We come for a reunion.
This is my 6th rainbow, so it's just every year more and more enhancement of more family together, and it just keeps getting more beautiful.
That people are putting out here, you know, everyone is really trying to practice those spiritual teachings that all the teachings teach us, you know, like love and sharing and caring for each other, and that's what's happening at these gatherings.
Don't have so much fear of us. We're out here to pray for peace.
Between the base of A Mountain and the course of the Santa Cruz River is the oldest inhabited spot in North America. Around the time the Pope crowned Charlemagne, locals in these parts decided to start plowing the ground and putting up houses. The Santa Cruz is the Euphrates River of America. Of course, back then there was water in the Santa Cruz. These days, with a city of about 1 million people sitting on its banks, the water table ain't too healthy. By mid-July and high summer, with the temperature hovering around 100 plus, everyone in town is going through a couple of gallons of water a day. At midday, the sunlight is brutal. As soon as sweat forms on your brow, it evaporates, leaving a fine film of salt granules. Still, there's water under the riverbed, enough to grow cotton north of town. Arizona's natural resources are called the 3 C's: cotton, copper, and cattle.
In this day and age of electronic marketing and corporate business, one of the eldest industries in Arizona lives on.
I think the cattle industry is still alive and well.
Don Carpenter comes to the Marana stockyards to sell his cattle to the highest bidder. He hopes to make about $900 on his 5 head of cattle. It's not much, but Carpenter says it's enough to pay the bills and put food on the table. Carpenter's ranch is nestled in this valley in the Tortolita Mountains, as seen from Chopper 13. Here, 250 head of cattle feed on 18,000 acres of land.
Carpenter is fortunate in that he owns his own ranch. He is one of very few ranchers that are still operating on private property. 85% of the ranchers in Arizona operate on public lands.
It's disturbing to see the livestock industry in stress.
Colin Kaltimba is the vice dean at the U of A's College of Agriculture. He says Arizona ranchers who operate on public lands are being hit hard by inflation and government regulations.
The cost of operation is much greater than it used to be and increasing all the time. And the livestock industry is being barraged with new rules and regulations on almost a daily basis.
Public land ranchers are also being hounded by environmentalists who sometimes prevent their cattle from grazing to protect desert vegetation.
I feel sorry for a lot of them.
Carpenter, meanwhile, can feel urban sprawl coming his way. Just on the other side of the Tortolitas sits the Honeybee Resort.
But I'm not necessarily against that. I'm not necessarily against people coming in. I think it's going to happen anyway.
Oh, did I mention my station has a helicopter? Chopper 13, we call it. It's cool. When you're standing on the skid about 400 feet in the air with a $40,000 camera on your shoulder, it's hard not to scream out at the top of your lungs, "I am the man." But then there is no telling how much damage such a sentiment would do to your karma or your hubris or whatever you want to call it. So I'm constantly reminding myself that you cannot tell a story from the air. And that's what I am, after all, a visual storyteller, not some crazy-ass bandito with a death wish.
They're strong, they're daring, they're the ladies of Harley. These days, women are changing gears from biker babes to easy riders.
I know the first time I got on that bike, I thought, wow, this is nice. Second time, I thought, wow, I want one.
Here in Tucson, 1 in 4 Harley owners is a woman. They even have their own club. Almost every week, these ladies take a spin through the Arizona desert.
It's absolute freedom. You cannot be stressed out when you ride a Harley. There's a wonderful feeling of being one with the wind, with the sun, with the weather.
I also enjoy the attention that I get by having mine, too. Some of the men are jealous. I like that.
Traditionally, this has been the place for women riding in the back seat behind your stereotypical biker like this guy. But today, gender roles are changing, and so are the kinds of women taking control of the throttle.
We used to be called outlaws. Now we are professionals, lawyers, doctors.
Diane Finney is a Harley saleswoman. She even built her own bike.
In my real life, I'm a captain with the Tucson Police Department.
In fact, she's one of the 3 highest-ranking female TPD officers. Patty Gilbert works for American Airlines.
Yes, I am a grandmother. Yes, I am.
Most female Harley riders are like these women, between 35 and 49 years old, with white-collar jobs and a college education. Some may wonder if the men feel threatened by these successful ladies.
No, not at all. In fact, we welcome it. You know, sure.
It's a good thing.
You better believe it. Yes.
Vogel says the men better accept it because women like her are taking the ride for the long haul.
When I retire, my dream is for my husband and I saddle up the Harleys and take off and see the United States together.
Emily Francis, News 13.
My dad's in Tucson, too. He's a transporter at Tucson Medical Center. He tells me stories about pushing 300-pound patients on 700-pound beds through crowded hospital corridors. Every day, he rides his bike to work. He doesn't like the cold, but he doesn't mind the heat. It'll be 100-plus outside, and he still pedals down the blacktop on his way to work. He even signed up to ride some long-distance course in the Senior Olympics. I try not to smart off to my dad too much these days. My mom's here, too. She manages an apartment complex for the elderly. The gig requires a lot of paperwork. She used to rail at me about my cursive handwriting. Now I envy her knowledge of this dying script. Every time I look at it, I think of her childhood in the late 40s and early 50s in Detroit. Oddly enough, my mom's more computer literate than me. She was the first one in her company to bring the computers up to Y2K standards, and in the process, debug the program for management. I've been reading a lot about Sartre and existentialism lately. Bad faith, foreground, background, existence precedes essence, all that jazz. You know how when you stand on a cliff and you realize you could jump off, you get that eerie feeling in your gut? Vertigo of possibility, he calls it. Proof of free will. I think Sartre had it right to a certain extent. He neglected to take the family into consideration, though. Family life is the opposite of free will. It's more like confined will. Yeah, confined will.
He don't like that toothpaste stuff. No.
Up With Parents Teachers have visited Matthew and Lori Horton in their home since Matthew Jr. was born 16 months ago.
It's taught me a lot of different things that I really didn't know. You know, how to deal with stress and how to deal with, you know, like when you get angry. Do you dance?
Do you dance?
Both parents have mental disabilities. Lori's had 5 other kids taken away from her, and the state's monitoring their care of Matthew.
You ever feel like it's too much that you can't handle it?
No, I just say hello, Daddy.
The Hortons learn what kinds of toys Matthew should be playing with, what they need to do to keep him healthy, and how they should be interacting with their child.
You sit and watch it with him and actually sing the songs with him. He gets more out of it. You see Matthew in there?
With kids of low-functioning parents, child neglect is the big fear.
They might not know that they need to do certain things to keep their child healthy, or they might not know that what they're doing is wrong. It'll help you remember to keep his morning routines the same as possible.
And that'll become even more important since the Hortons have another baby on the way.
What do you like about being a mom?
I like had time planning, take that out,
Something to do. But we get in here and we try to make it so that it works for the family, so that they're able to keep their children and raise their children.
As far as for Matthew, it's actually helped him quite a bit because he shows a lot more feelings and emotions than he normally would.
The teacher shows parents how to catch their child's mistakes and keep their family as a family.
It makes me feel full. Yeah. Like my life is whole.
It wasn't my idea to mic the mother up. It was the reporter's. But he was right. She was an important part of the story. One might even say she was the story. It's what I do. I invade your space, take your privacy, and use it to illustrate a story. We're always telling people to ignore the camera, pretend it's not there, in effect creating the illusion of an unseen observer. No one is allowed to address the camera except the reporter. Interestingly enough, there's an amendment in the Constitution which allows us to do this. These days, there are a lot of folks condemning the intrusive nature of the media. They say it was better in the old days. I wasn't around back then, when the government, business, and the media were all in bed together, presenting a united front in an effort to defeat fascism and then communism. But I tend to think that today we're fulfilling the role our forefathers had in mind when they wrote the Constitution, allowing pamphleteers to bring up Jefferson's debatable practices with his slaves, and in general calling into question our national leaders' sexual proclivities. Ow! That hurt. God, that was my head. All right, I'll tell you a sports story. Jeez. In San Diego, they have this thing called the Culligan Holiday Bowl, which is held in the Qualcomm Stadium. It used to just be the Holiday Bowl in the Jack Murphy Stadium, but a couple of dweebs in neckties decided to change all that. Nothing is sacred when a dweeb in a necktie gets a hold of it. To be honest, unlike most of my male peers, I don't think sports are all that. And as of yet, I'm still undecided as to whether this whole mob spectator thing is a good thing for society. It resembles the gladiator shows of ancient Rome to such an extent that I find myself repulsed by the whole scene. Yet the concept of victory through gain somehow speaks to my soul, and to avert my eyes from the contest at hand becomes impossible. Besides, nowhere else is the delicate nature of human endeavor so starkly illustrated than on the football field.
What kind of seats are these? What's the point doing? Give me a nosebleed seats.
Hey, I don't care. We're here. We're part of the Wildcats. That's all that's exciting. We just want to be here. We're just part of it. We're part of the hoopla, you know? That's all that's important. I don't care. And we can see everything. Perfect seats. We don't even need binoculars. You can see everything.
My primary responsibility in San Diego did not include shooting the game. I just did that in my spare time. I was the human interest photographer. The guy whose job it was to get the highlights is a total badass with the camera. Watching his raw video is like having a magic trick explained to you. In the movie Amadeus, I would be Salinari to his Mozart. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not like I'm complaining. I mean, there was plenty of stuff to shoot here. I would ask you now to pause a moment while I look back fondly on my childhood. When I was 12 or 13, my family would take a day trip to the Lake Michigan shoreline. Hanging off my shoulder was a 35mm camera my dad had bought when he was 18, and then passed on to me one forgotten day in the murky mid-70s. The three of us would wander through the marina looking at the boats and the people. I would take pictures. Photography was a 4-H project, nothing more, just something to keep me busy. Eventually, we would make our way out onto the beach. There we would walk barefoot through the gentle lapping waves of the inland lake. Hey, I'm having fond memories here, okay? I haven't seen a lake in a long time. Anyway, my dad would occasionally spot a hot chick sunning herself on the beach. He would then send me up to take her picture. My mom and dad would joke about it later, how this dirty old man would send his kid in to do his dirty work. It was all a lark. No way any of us could have known it was on-the-job training.
The Pride of Arizona stopped hundreds of SeaWorld goers today as they paused to hear the band, and in the crowd was a torn couple. Nancy Sutton Moss in the Nebraska jacket and Glenn Moss in the U of A polo shirt. Torn because they're from Lincoln, Nebraska, but their daughter was right in front of them performing with the pride of Arizona. It seems Jenny Sutton prefers the desert to the cornfields.
She's been a Husker fan forever, but she came down to the University of Arizona. She auditioned for musical theater, got in. Auditioned for the Palm Line, got in, and she's there.
When Jenny learned Nebraska and Arizona would meet in the Holiday Bowl, she was excited, but as torn as her family. After all, she's a Cornhusker fan by birth and a Wildcat fan by choice.
All the girls on the squad won't let me admit that, you know, I kind of am rooting for Nebraska a little bit deep down. They're all like, don't say that. I'm like, okay.
So who will root for who tomorrow? Nancy is a die-hard Nebraska fan, and they're sitting in the Nebraska section. But Glenn's figured out how to show support for both teams.
I plan on wearing a Nebraska sweatshirt with an Arizona jacket.
5 days later, I was in Tempe, Arizona, shooting the Fiesta Bowl. Boy, am I sick of football.
Apparently, from what I'm told, every time my station goes out over the airwaves with a newscast, somebody is watching. In spite of the fact that the number of viewers is dwindling from year to year, and the fact that my station is in 3rd place in the Tucson market, there's still a sizable chunk of folks sitting in front of their televisions watching the efforts of my coworkers and myself. Personally, the concept of viewership is way too abstract for my feeble mind to grasp. It's not like we have an audience we can reach out to touch, or feel their approval or disdain, or hear their applause or boos. And while this is a good thing, after all, we in the news business are not entertainers, it is rather awkward since we are putting our efforts into something dressed up in the garb of public performance. Fortunately, I'm in the field on a daily basis, and I have come to the conclusion that it is those whom I interview for the benefit of the greater audience who are my audience.
A violin is tuned E, A, D, G, and the fiddle is usually played out of tune. A violin is something you play in a tuxedo, and a fiddle is something you usually play in bib overalls.
What do you think a fiddle sounds like, sir?
Well, it reminds me of the Old West. It's kind of like a rock concert without any electricity.
It reminds me of the hills of West Virginia where they played all the bluegrass music.
What do you think it sounds like?
Sometimes angel wings.
There you go.
Sometimes mosquitoes.
It's a little bit like the sound of a power saw going through a board when it hits a nail, when I play. But now some of these folks play it sounds like a chorus of angels.
I suppose if you're going to be a photographer, Arizona ain't a bad place to do it. For one thing, you almost always have a ton of light to work with when you're shooting. And at dawn or dusk, the possibilities are endless. Then there's the mountains and a unique environment. But mostly it's the culture that keeps things interesting. I mean, all that sun tends to keep people pretty upbeat. Combine that with the Latino influence, best summed up with the term mañana, which loosely translated means later, and you got yourself a pretty laid-back atmosphere to work in. Of course, for an Anglo brought up in the Dutch Protestant country of West Michigan, this all tends to wear thin after a while. Still, if you spend a decent chunk of time out here, you will get healthier, whether you want to or not.
In the song,
Pure, unadulterated idiocy would bring me out here for a story. Only pure, unadulterated idiocy would allow me to sleep in my truck last night and wake up to come out here to shoot Cowboy College, which is the story I'm working on. They're out there somewhere. Oh, you can't see them, but they're on a ridge, first ridge out there. They're going up the hill. There's a row of about 19 of them, about 10 ranch hands and about, maybe it's less than that, I don't know. There's a bunch of city slickers and a bunch of ranch hands, and they're all gone out to look for cows and bring them back. There's nothing up here. I'm in the middle of nowhere. To get here, I had to drive down that road out there. And I made a wrong turn and drove clear up to there. And I realized I'd gone the wrong direction. It's really easy to get lost out here. The vehicle I drove to get up here is that Ford Explorer. 4 days ago, I was driving another vehicle down the road and blew a rod. They said if I ruined this vehicle, they would kill me. Fortunately, I'm going to San Antonio, so it doesn't really matter. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the tape. I tried to make it as short as possible, but it got kind of out of control on me and got a little long. But I tried to make it as entertaining as possible and keep the pace up and tell you as much about Arizona and Tucson as I could without getting in the way too much. And I know I got in the way quite a lot. Maybe you ought to just turn down the volume and look at it. You'll probably learn more from the pictures than you will from me. But that's it. Maybe in a couple years I'll send you one from San Antonio.
Y'all just like fucking up people's lives just to get your fucking stories, huh?
It's my job, man. I'm sorry about that.
Man, put a gun on yourself, yeah.
In case you're interested, the following people have also received this tape as well as you. My mom and dad, Aunt Helen, Uncle Wayne, Mark Bill, Louise Zenzo, Jan Barker, Keith Reed, Dave Rapp, Katie Cagney, Richard Shelby, Kim Locke, Mark Mayer, Roger Sutton, Chris Kettlewell, Ken Martinek, Helen Lukatis, Nancy Rudzinski, and Shelley Jackson.